Started now. So thank you very much for coming out today. What I'd like to talk about is a topic I call Beyond Easy Agile. And first I'd like to point out I'm one of the authors of the book that was included in your bag today. So if you want to get it signed and stuff like that, I'll be around all day and I'm happy to do that. I'd also like to point out, so Ahmed, in Ahmed's talk just a few minutes ago, he's working through leadership and how there's no leaders on Agile teams and stuff like that. I'd like to just sort of brag that was a solved problem about 10 years ago. We don't run into those problems in Discipline Agile because we actually have a team lead, not the Scrum Master nonsense. But anyways, just wanted to point that out, that something a little interesting. And we solved the same problem for architecture and a few other things. So this is what happens when you deal with enterprise issues. So anyways, what would I like to talk about? So my name is Scott Ambler. I'm one of the people behind the Discipline Agile framework. I'm also, I've been around and doing this Agile stuff for a long, long time. I'm the guy behind the Agile modeling method and the Agile data stuff. So I tend to take on hard, not so interesting problems, like interesting problems, I guess, if that's the way you think. But certainly I take on the less sexy topics in the Agile world, like how do you address documentation? How do you go about modeling? How do you do this database stuff in an Agile manner? How do you do this across the enterprise? How do you deal with Agile when you're dealing with legacy systems and legacy cultures and not so perfect situations? So anyways, the not so perfect situations is something that I call hard Agile. So today's talk is going to be about how do we go beyond this easy Agile stuff that we often hear about from people. And we were sort of hearing about some of that from Ahmed this morning. And because he ran into problems where the easy Agile solutions just weren't cutting it at his game company. And he had to actually evolve and do harder Agile stuff to make it work. So anyways, let's talk about that. So I'm gonna cover a lot of ground this morning. I want to get you thinking outside of the box. So if you're new to Agile, I'll definitely get you thinking outside of the box. And that book we gave out in the bag, that's definitely an intro book. We've got a lot of other material other than just the intro stuff, but I'm going to cover a lot of ground, and I want to get you definitely want to get you thinking. And even if you're experienced with Agile, I want to get you thinking, because I'm going to probably call BS on a lot of the stuff that you might be hearing from other people. So I'm a firm believer in empiricism and actually acting on it and observing what's going on in the real world and sharing what's going on. So anyway, let's be pragmatic about things. So first of all, what is easy Agile? What am I talking about when I say we're going to go beyond easy Agile? Well, easy Agile, I like to look at it from two scales. First of all, easy Agile, if the mindset perspective. So easy Agile is when we're dealing with people that want to be Agile. They want to be collaborative. They want to be flexible. But we also have people in the organization that are very skeptical about being Agile. They don't believe in it. It's obviously evil, and it goes against their religion. It goes against their theory that they've been working towards for decades now sometimes. And Ahmed was talking about what do you do with the project managers? Well, they have a very interesting mindset of themselves, and they're often scapegoats and they get blamed for things. But at the same time, they might not be the most agile folks on the planet. Sometimes they're very agile, but that's a different issue. And the other spectrum is change. How do they, from a mindset point of view, are they willing to accept change? Do they want to evolve? Do they want to learn? Do they want to get better? So easy Agile is when we're preaching to the choir. When we have people that are very pro-Agile and they want to change, they want to learn, they want to get better, sort of an easy kill. Hard Agile from a mindset perspective is when we're dealing with skeptical people, when we're dealing with people who want to avoid change and don't want to learn, don't want to change, they're very happy with doing what they want to do. Then we have the context perspective, and that was great that Emma was talking about context. In the Discipline Agile framework, one of our principles is context counts. Different teams in different situations will work differently. Exactly what Ahmed was getting at in his talk. So easy Agile is when we have these small co-located teams taking on fairly straightforward problems. We've got access to our stakeholders. We've got the authority and responsibility to succeed. The organization's basically gotten out of the way. We have a fairly straightforward technical environment. We've got a fairly straightforward problem we're taking on. Not really dealing with regulatory stuff. So fairly straightforward. The fantasy world stuff that we all wish we were living in. I never get to see that. I hear stories about that. I work in banks and retail companies, working on electronic systems and really, really complex problems, not in established organizations, not in small startup firms where you're not dealing with any cultural challenges or any legacy problems or good stuff like that. So the hard Agile is when you're dealing with one or more of those things. You got large teams and geographically distributed teams. A whole different ballgame when your team is spread out across multiple locations or multiple countries, or you've got regulatory issues, or you've got legacy systems. You got to fix your technical debt. You got to pay down your data technical debt. You got to start putting the automated regression tests in place that you didn't bother to invest in over the last few decades. Right? You got a total dog's breakfast on your hand. Congratulations, this is what you're now evolving. Dog's breakfast. So that's Canadian slang for really, really ugly, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So anyways, and what happens when you got contractors involved, or you're outsourcing some stuff, or management was kind enough to outsource absolutely critical things to you in order to save a couple dollars, and now you're waiting weeks and sometimes months to get basic freaking things done. So in order to save $100, you got to waste $10,000 waiting for stuff. And because my good friends in the finance department struggle to count stuff, the bean counters really do sort of struggle to count the beans sometimes, or there's a lot of beans they don't want to count because all their decisions would be fundamentally flawed if they were to include those beans. We've got serious problems, right? So the organization has done a few things for us that really sort of made it hard for us to get anything done. Yeah, I know. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, finance department. Thank you. Appreciate that. Glad you're making your numbers because nobody else does. Glad you made your bonus this year. I was actually working in a company just a few days ago where very clear decisions were being made for the financial people to make their bonus this year as opposed to pretty much everybody else. But hey, you know what? If I was in the finance department, maybe I would do that too. Probably wouldn't. But anyways, what can you do? Okay, so anyways, the challenges that we actually face. So first of all, organizations are what's called a complex adaptive system. We've got multiple teams. So this idea that a single team can possibly be responsible for everything, can possibly have all the resources they need to get the job done is absolutely false. One of the things that I do, I'm one of those annoying guys that run surveys on a regular basis. So if you ever get a tweet or an email from me asking you to fill out a survey, please get off your butt and fill out the survey. Because I share the data publicly. And it's very, very interesting. I've got masters and PhD students using my data to help them in their research. So totally open stuff. So anyways, in a recent survey, I guess about a year ago, we asked the question, so if you're on an Agile team right now, do you have to interact with other teams in order to get the job done? So do you have to interact with the governance people? Do you have to interact with the operations people or the marketing people or this people or that people? And a mere 96% of respondents said that, yeah, my Agile team has to interact with somebody else. So these teams aren't whole. This is a complete and utter myth in the Agile community that we have whole teams. I'm a firm believer in whole teams. It's just I also recognize that my team needs to collaborate with other teams to get the job done, and that's okay. And as a result, when I'm interacting with these other teams, I'm affecting them, and they're affecting my team. So we need to have an overall vision of how we're going to work together in order to get the job done. And the thing is my team, my development team, we might have a very different vision than the data management folks. And we might have a very different religion, and a very different set of priorities, a very different set of skills. We might get rewarded very differently. And yet we still have to work together as an organization to get the job done. So that might be a leadership challenge. I don't know. Another interesting thing is IT departments are multi-modal. So Gartner for a few years now has been talking about bimodal organizations where some teams move really fast and some teams move really slow. That's a step in the right direction, and there's a lot of people that are arguing vehemently against that. I would invite them to actually observe what's going on. And usually the people that argue against the bimodal thing are, their entire argument is well, I'm in denial of teams that move slow. And to be fair, they're probably right. It's probably a bad idea for those teams to be moving slow. But at the same time, there are situations where that does make sense. So let's celebrate that and do the right thing. So our observation is it's nowhere near as simple as the Gartner folks would like. And it's really a multimodal situation. And I invite you to observe this in your organization. Just sit back and observe what you're really doing as opposed to the fantasy world stuff that you were wishing were doing or that the consultants are telling you. And when you begin your agile transformation, whatever that is, I think it's pretty easy to observe that we've got a few teams doing some sort of agile-ish thing, and are they agile or not, that's another story, but they claim to be agile, so we'll give them credit. And a bunch of teams doing, well, not agile. Then after a couple years, if you step back and observe what's really going on, you got some teams doing agile, maybe you got some teams doing some sort of lean Kanban thing, maybe you got a few teams, they've stuck together for a while, now they've at the point where they're doing continuous delivery and are throwing the DevOps buzzword around a bit. Maybe they're even doing some sort of a lean startup exploratory thing. And a few years after that, we see we got more agile, more lean, more of this, more of that, but we still have a few traditional projects. Because it does, in fact, there are a few situations where traditional makes sense. Not many, certainly nowhere near as many as the traditionalists will tell you, but there are a few situations where that makes sense, and that's okay. Okay? So we need to observe this. So from the point of view of executives or managers, whatever you're going to call them, we're going to be in this multimodal world for a long time, and that's okay. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could govern and support these teams and help them be successful, even though this team here is working in a traditional manner, this team here is working in an agile manner, this team over here is doing continuous delivery, and that's okay. Yet we still have to support them all and interact with them. And so if I'm an enterprise architect, I'll work with the traditional team in a traditional way, the agile team in an agile way, and the continuous delivery team in a continuous way. Okay, I need to be flexible. There's an implication for anybody who's cross-team. So, and we have some external challenges as well. We have all these self-inflicted cultural problems and legacy problems. We also have some external challenges. We have, our industries are being disrupted. I've been working in the retail industry, the grocery business recently, and Amazon recently entered that. They picked off Whole Foods, and now they're running experiments with cashierless stores and good stuff like that. That is an existential threat to an existing grocery chain. Good luck. Good luck. So good luck competing against Amazon. But anyways, this is very interesting to observe. We do a lot of work in the financial industry as well, and it's interesting. One of the favorite questions that I ask when I'm working with executives is, what keeps you up at night? What are you scared about? Who are your main competitors? It's been over 2 years now, approaching 3, since I've heard a banking executive tell me that they were worried about other banks. So the banks aren't worried about banks, they're worried about Apple and Amazon and eBay and all these other companies that are jumping in, and all these fintech companies, they're jumping in and eating their lunch. They don't care, Bank of America really isn't all that threatened by Wells Fargo and vice versa. They're all worried about Apple. Interesting observation. Because they've got these disruptive competitors who they can't predict, who change the rules, basically, who don't accept the rules. Amazon does not accept the rules of the grocery business. They do not accept this idea that we need cashiers in a grocery store, and they're actively building stores now and experimenting and figuring it out. They're actively delivering groceries now to the door quickly and doing it well and still making money at it. This is a very disruptive thing for an existing grocery chain. And of course, we have security threats. Our good friends, the hackers, are always doing wonderful things. We have dramatic political changes. And every day, every day there's some nonsense on Twitter. Isn't that wonderful? And the fake and the real news. Who knows who they actually are in the United States? But anyways, some of them are fake, some of them are real. Who knows what? I suspect the labels are totally opposite of what's really going on, but we'll have to see in the long run. I'm from Canada, so our second, after hockey, our second national sport is to make fun of America. So, but it's been really easy the last couple of years. But anyways, and we have customers that expect to be delighted, not just satisfied, not just kept happy, but be delighted. And if we're not delighting our customers on a regular basis, somebody else will come along and do that for us and take those customers away from us, and then suddenly we have a significant business challenge in front of us. So that's okay. And of course, we have some self-inflicted, some internal problems. We have traditional cultures. We have a lot of legacy systems in place, legacy data in place. We have overly specialized staff. We have organizational silos. We have poor alignment between business and IT. The fact that we're talking about business and IT as separate things is an interesting problem right there. We have inappropriate governance structures in place. We have out-of-control governance. I still run into organizations where their idea of governance is something called quality gates and filling out templates, and everybody has to fill in the same freaking documents. That is not governance, that is useless bureaucracy. Absolutely zero governance is occurring when everybody's filling out the same templates in order to fill out documents to get through some quality gate. Okay, we've got to start observing that there's no relationship whatsoever between risk mitigation and doing that. That's all just expensive bureaucracy, almost all of which is being faked by the delivery teams, by the way. That is also an interesting thing to observe if you choose to. So we got to do better. We also have agile teams working at scale. This small, simple team thing is I love the concept, but it just isn't happening. We have 1/4 of our teams are more like a single team is more than 20 people. Now 3/4 is 20 people or less, of course. 71% of teams are geographically distributed in some way. So this small co-located team concept, not really happening in practice. We need to observe that. It's not what we want to see. Certainly not what we've had rammed down our throats for 15 years now. More than 15 years, 17 years. But it is certainly the reality. I invite you to observe what's going on as opposed to wishful thinking. 78% of agile teams are working in medium to complex domains. We're taking on harder problems. We've done studies that show that the organizations that are doing both agile and traditional, they've been doing it for a couple of years, so they now have some competency and capability in both the agile and traditional space. They tend to have this behavior where they've discovered that the more complex problems, the harder problems, they give to the agile teams now, and the simpler, more straightforward things, the no-brainer stuff, that's what the traditional guys are good at dealing with. And that's a very interesting observation to start making. And it makes sense, right? Because the Agilists, they're more collaborative, they're working incrementally, getting feedback all the time, working more visibly. As a result, they can take on complexity in a much better way. 58% of Agile teams have non-FTEs involved, non-full-time. So people that don't, contractors or outsourcing people. 58%. I think we need to get good at procurement if that's the situation. For almost 2/3 of our teams have non-employees involved. And 17% of Agile teams have outsourcing involved. So we've outsourced some or most of the effort here. All desperately need to get good at procurement at that case. Okay, so this isn't easy. You need to be flexible. You need to know what you're doing. 2 entire days of training and then declaring yourself a master might not be good enough. Or 4 days of training and declaring yourself a professional might not be good enough. Ooh. There's a cheap shot. Easy to observe, though, if you choose to. Okay, anyways, so Enterprise Agile, what does this look like in practice? So I think it's pretty easy to observe that everybody's unique. I don't see any identical twins here. And if any of you know identical twins, one of the very first things they do, they're adamant how they're different from each other, right? One of them will be purposely dyeing their hair blue, or there'll be some weird thing going on. They will be very clear that they are different people because they're tired of this weird assumption that identical twins are identical. So anyways, everybody's unique. We have different viewpoints, different skills, different preferences, different ways of interacting with others. This is observably true. Keep that in mind. Every team faces a unique situation. We have small teams, we have large teams, we have teams in regulatory environments, we have teams in non-regulatory environments, we have teams taking on simple problems, taking on hard problems, dealing with legacy stuff, dealing with brand new stuff, having to fix legacy stuff, being able to ignore legacy problems. We have teams that are outsourcing some of the work. We have teams that are geographically distributed. Your team is in a different situation than somebody else's team, and that's okay. You will work differently. Very clearly, a team of 5 people will work differently than 50 than a team of 500. Very clearly, a team in a non-regulatory situation will work differently than a team in a regulatory situation, and so on. This is blatantly obvious. So that tells us one process size does not fit all. One strategy does not fit all. This was a clear theme in Ahmed's keynote this morning. They had to change the process. He shared this technique where he goes to the team with this list of responsibility, these responsibility cards, and each team figures out how they're going to do that. So every team, on the very, very beginning of forming the team, they configure their approach to reflect the situation that they find themselves in. Every team is working differently, and this is the way they're successful, is by allowing the teams to own their process, to get out of their ways, and say, hey, you know what, you're responsible for this. You go figure out how you're going to work together and get the job done. That's up to you. Okay, you figure out, as long as you fulfill these responsibilities, you're good to go. I think that's a very, very good way of working, because context counts. So every team collaborates differently. Every team approaches their requirements differently. For example, if you're in an organization where you've got a data warehousing team, that data warehousing team will do initial scoping in a much different way than a team doing mobile development, who in turn will work in a much different way than a team doing SAP development, and so on and so on and so on. They're still doing initial requirements, but they're different people in different situations doing it differently. Every team approaches testing differently. Every team needs different kinds of help from other teams. Some teams are reasonably well contained. Other teams need a heck of a lot of help. It is what it is. Every team approaches deployment differently. So these cookbook approaches won't work. Yeah, there's wonderful posters out there, and this wonderful rhetoric around reducing variability in your process. And that, by the way, is marketing speak for prescription. Don't fall for that. Okay, so the cookbook approaches won't work. If it's a recipe if it's a cookbook that describes what you're actually taking on, great. If it's not, so for example, applying a cookbook, a recipe for kitchen cacciatore when what you really want is a hamburger for dinner, not going to work out so well for you. I don't know what that's going to look like on a bun, but it certainly won't be a hamburger. So what we've got to do. So when I go to cook a meal, if I cook a meal tonight, I'm going to go to the cupboard or the grocery store. I'm going to pick the ingredients that I need for kitchen cacciatore or for the hamburger or for the lasagna, whatever it is I'm cooking tonight. I'm going to cook, use the right ingredients to cook that meal. Tomorrow night when I cook another meal, I'll take different ingredients and I'll cook that meal. I'm still cooking. I'm still doing whatever you need to do to cook, but a different set of ingredients used in different ways. All that good sort of stuff. So anyways, we've got to do the right thing in the situation that we face, which means we know what we want to do. So here's a list of a list of car companies. Now cars, I would argue, are a commodity, right? We can all go outside right now. There's a parking lot full of cars. They're all commodities. We can all drive, assuming we got the keys, we can all drive them, because they got wheels, but they all drive differently, right? So even though cars are very obviously a commodity product, and that's not what the car manufacturers will tell you, but it's obviously, they're pretty much a commodity. I think it's pretty clear that Ford works in a different way than Porsche. That works in a different way than Tesla. That works in a different way than Chrysler, and so on. So even though we've got these car companies building commodity products, dealing with the same laws of physics that all the rest of them are dealing with, I think it's obvious that those car companies are going to work in different ways. And yet, I can safely say about 90% of these companies, when they first decided to go agile, one of the very first things out of their mouths, out of the executives' mouths, would have been, "I need to see a case study from 3 other companies just like us before I can make a decision." And yet, I think inherently we know all these companies are different, even though they appear, they hope they're the same. But anyways, stuff's happening. So. And it's not just about software development, of course. It's also about DevOps. It's about Agile IT. I think Ahmed was getting at that too. The entire organization needs to be Agile. It's not just software development. So I can have a great software development team, but if my procurement folks are shooting me in the foot, or the finance folks are shooting me in the foot, then I'm sort of done, right? And I'm sure many of you are suffering from that. So either you have to let these other areas, and this is just IT right now, the other areas within IT, minimally they've got to get out of your way and allow you to be agile. Better yet, they should say, hey, you know what, you're being agile? Hey, let's help me become agile too. Let's experiment with this and I can learn and get better as well. So maybe the data management folks can learn from the agile teams and start releasing things into production and fixing data sources and good stuff like that. So anyways, there's a lot of opportunity here. So we need to look at the bigger picture. And what's interesting about this, now this is very high level, of course, but we got, there's no starting point, there's no ending point, it's continuous flow. So we want to optimize the flow across across the process. And all these, if these are different teams or different groups, everybody's going to be working differently, learning and evolving as they go. This is another interesting implication. All this process stuff, this organization structure stuff, it's all a moving target. It's constantly evolving. We're constantly learning. We're constantly getting better. So there's some very interesting implications for audit and for, well, just for general organizational stuff and for governance and leadership and good things like that. So we need to be pragmatic. A very interesting challenge, I think, in the Agile community right now, we have a lot of purists. If you're not doing exactly this, you're doing Scrum Butt, and therefore you're evil. No, you're doing what we need to do. Ahmed was very clear. They tried the Scrum stuff, wasn't working out well for them, had leadership issues, good stuff like that. So they rethought things and changed. They evolved. They learned. That's okay. He was being pragmatic, very pragmatic, because he needed to get the job done as opposed to getting a little gold star from the Agile guys. So in Discipline Agile, we're very pragmatic. We actually include techniques which really aren't all that agile, but it might be the best you can do right now, or it might be the best thing you can do. So we like to make fun of the PMs and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes having a PM around really is a good thing. Usually not, but sometimes it is, right? So we need to accept that. So there's a lot of good stuff going on there. So one of the observations is that even though every team works differently, and Ahmed sort of solved this in a similar way, different terminology, but in a similar way. So in Discipline Agile, or at least in Discipline Agile delivery, what we observe, so even though every team works differently, there's still some commonality. So when we first get going, we've got to put the team together. We've got to do some initial requirements. We've got to do some initial architecture, put our testing strategy together, do some initial planning. Now, there's many different ways we can do that, but at a high level, we do all those things. During construction, we've got to build a working, potentially consumable solution. We've got to pay down technical debt, good stuff like that. Hopefully prove our architecture early. Throughout all this, we should be growing our team members. We should be improving. We should be learning, changing our infrastructure, good stuff like that. Coordinating activities both within the team and across teams. And there's different ways you can do all that. So at a high level, there's some similarity. So this is where we can start governing perhaps and start guiding and training people. So where Ahmed talked about responsibilities, we talk about process goals, but it's the same basically. You've got the responsibility to secure funding, different ways to do that. But we take it one step further, and what we say is, oh, by the way, when you go to address changing stakeholder needs throughout construction, well, there's a few things you need to worry about, or you should be concerned about. So how are you going to go about managing our work items? Or do we have formal change management? Or are we going to do like a Scrum requirement backlog type of a thing? Or are we going to do a little more sophisticated, do more of a work item list or a backlog thing? Or go lean? So there's different ways that we can manage the work. Each of these strategies, so what we're doing here, so here's our goal. We're going to address changing stakeholder needs. We've got a bunch of decision points that we need to meet. So we've got to think about how we're going to manage our work items. How are we going to go about prioritizing our work? There's different ways we can do that. When are we going to accept changing requirements, if at all? Different options there. How are we going to interact with our team? Are we, do stakeholders interact via product owners? Do they do it via business analysts? Do we have the stakeholders come in, like the business people, on the team? Do the developers interact directly with the business folks or with the stakeholders in general? How are we going to go about eliciting requirements? Different options there. Sometimes when there's an arrow, that's an indication that the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. Sort of a maturity model thing, sort of not. Whereas here, there's no arrow. So all these are great options, potentially. All of them have trade-offs, but we can't really say that prioritizing by business value is better than doing weighted shortest job first, regardless of all the religious discussions we currently have going on in the industry about that. So this is what's going on. So where Ahmed was talking about saying, hey, you got the responsibility to do that, you go figure it out, which is great, very flexible. In Discipline Agile, we take it one step further. We say, hey, you got the responsibility for doing this. You'd better think this stuff through. And by the way, here's your options, and here's how you choose between them. So now you can make more intelligent choices and home in on an approach right away. Because the problem with saying, oh, go and make kitchen cacciatore tonight. What the heck is kitchen cacciatore? If you don't even know what it is, you're sort of screwed, right? Chicken's involved. I think tomatoes are involved. That's about it. I don't know, right? I'm not a chef. I don't know, right? So give the person a recipe. At least give them a recipe and give them a shot at doing this. So anyway, help them out. So this is the idea here. But still keep it lightweight. That's the event, because you don't want, nobody wants to read ridiculous amounts of process documentation. So when we're doing all this this process transformation, improvement, continuous journey, improvement journey stuff, what's going on? I'm a bit old school, and my observation is that when you're doing these transformation journeys, there's really 3 major issues you got to deal with. The people and culture stuff, that's the vast majority of the effort. But you still got to address process issues, because people got to know what they're doing. And you still got some tooling issues as well, right? And there's a lot of rhetoric around tooling, figuring out your process before doing the tooling. I'm going to call BS on that. That's true for the trivial tools like the project management tools like the Jiras and the TFSs of the world, stuff like that. But you know what? I challenge you. Walk me through how you do continuous integration without a CI tool on day 1. Really? So please tell me. Or TDD, or many of the technical practices. You need technical tools for the technical practices, and you need them pretty much on day 1, right? So don't give me this, let's go figure out the process for several months nonsense, and then we'll start adopting tools, and then 5 seconds later you're downloading JUnit. Like, come on. Anyway, so let's observe. Please observe what's going on, as opposed to listening to the rhetoric. So anyways, we, a couple years ago now, we ran an adoption survey to ask people a series of questions. What was actually going on? So we looked at organizations that were either were well along the path. So if you had just started your adoption, I think it had to be a couple years in, or you were kicked out of the survey at the very first round. And we asked two sets of questions. The first set of questions was around what types of challenges did you face? Right? Or how important were how serious were these challenges? And what we found from people that were actually doing this stuff, that sure enough, changing the business, so the top 3 challenges were changing the business culture, people and culture, adopting agile technical practices, so process stuff, and then changing the IT culture. So culture and process were the top 3 issues. Now tooling and other things are still important. It was interesting that adopting the agile management practices, holding a daily stand-up meeting and holding a demo, was considered trivial. Not, because any idiot can schedule a meeting basically, right? Not hard to do the Scrum practices. But what was also interesting, we also asked how important, how valuable were these things? So we also, and as you'd expect, changing the culture and the people issues, very important, very high value stuff. But a lot of people found the management practices, even though they're easy to adopt, but they had a lot of value, right? Perhaps because they were dealing with the project management challenges that they were currently facing as an organization, perhaps. I don't know. Just like Amma was talking about earlier today. But the technical practices weren't quite as valuable. So I thought, and the tool stuff was coming in dead last. But what can you do? Sorry for the tool vendors. So anyway, like I said, I'm a firm believer in observing what's going on in the industry. And this pretty much matched what I'd been observing. But it's always nice to get data, right? Ask people what's actually going on. Get them away from the rhetoric and ask them what's actually happening. And you often get different answers. And by the way, don't trust me on any, all these surveys, the questions are original questions posted online, the answers, the original source data is posted online, my analysis is there. You can crunch the data if you want. You do not have to trust me whatsoever. So if you go to ambisoft.com, all the data is there, free of charge. Go download it, play with it, enjoy, write whatever you want. And like I said, I've got researchers using it. It's research quality stuff, because I've got researchers helping me with this stuff. I'm not doing it by myself, because that's a lot of work. I'm lazy. Anyways, call it it is. Okay, so what's my observation? Now these are all observational, so take it for what it is. But the observations of my company helping organizations for many years now is these people and culture stuff, the individuals' interactions. 85% of the effort, like the vast majority of the effort, is helping shift the mindset, help people get the skills, coach them, train them, all that sort of stuff. That's the vast majority of the effort. Having said that, though, adopting new processes and new practices also a bit of the effort. So don't beware of these coaches that are telling you that it's all about the mindset, it's all about the touchy-feely big group hug stuff. There's some significant value there, don't get me wrong. But if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't know the practices that you're helping people adopt, you're really not getting there. So There's a lot of great hockey coaches out there in the world, and basketball coaches and golf coaches, but I wouldn't hire them to be an Agile team coach. Awesome coaches, don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to Agile, so don't really need them. But I'm sure there's a wonderful basketball coach out there somewhere that's teaching an Agile team, or coaching an Agile team even as we speak. And we got to put some investment in tools as well. You're going to be adopting some new tools. You're going to be abandoning some existing tools. You're going to be changing your usage patterns of existing tools as well. So you still might be using Microsoft Project, but in a very different way, right? Much more lightweight, more effective, and stuff like that. And this can be hard because there's a lot of companies. You've spent $500,000 or a couple $1 million on Quality Center or on other tools, and now you start doing Agile and you realize, wow, this tool that was great for traditional, absolute kiss of death for Agile, and we spent several $1 million on it. Ugh. It's a hard decision to abandon that. So learn about the term sunk cost. You've thrown that money away. It was a good investment at the time. Take credit for that. Now it's a spectacularly bad idea, and and it's a really serious problem for you to continue on with that tool, even though it's very embarrassing to admit the fact, yeah, we spent $3 million on this, and now we're going to throw it in the trash heap. $3 million well spent when we needed it. Now we don't need it. Get rid of it. Get it out of the way. Clean house. So transition strategy. So this is a few interesting observations here. So when you only focus on people stuff, you're going to get teams that understand how this Agile stuff works. Well, they don't really understand how Agile works. They're running meetings and stuff like that, but they don't really understand the implications of their actions, right? You might be developing really good software, but it doesn't fit in with everything else, right? So we got a few issues there. If we only focus on the process stuff, you get cargo cult Agile. So yeah, you're running your meetings. You've added new meetings, but you're not really getting anything work done. If you focus on the tools, you get this overly complex, standardized Agile. Particularly if all these ALM tools from a few years ago, they're trying to boil the ocean with one tool set. Yeah, good luck with that. Anyways, and if you only focus on people and tools, then you get Agile kids playing with new toys, and that's fun. I love doing that. I'll admit that. But it's not what we want as an organization. If you get people only focusing on people and process, you get Agile zealots working in small rooms. So where all the purists raise their ugly heads. If you only focus on tools and process, you get cargo cult Agile, but at least it's standardized and automated. Automated bureaucracy. Woohoo! What you really want is to focus on all three. Get deal with all three things appropriately, and build your Agile teams that have the ability to work at scale. So that's what we're really aiming for here. So, what's it like being a coach in an established organization? Not in a small startup, but in the banks of the world, and the retail companies of the world, and the airplane companies of the world. I'll get there's a few airline companies here, I imagine. I know for a fact. Anyway, so the usual transformation strategy. Here's what we sell. I don't sell, but here's what a lot of people sell. So we're gonna get some pilot teams, and we're gonna roll it out team at a time, until eventually we're all Agile. Woohoo! Way to go. That's the plan. What really happens? We roll out to a few teams and we stack the deck, right? We cherry pick. We put some of our better people on the teams. We take some of the easier problems on. So we basically set them up to succeed, which is smart. I see the wisdom in that. But then what happens? We start taking on harder problems. And now we don't have all the A players anymore. Now we're staffing our teams with the B players and the C players. And so what happens, we keep going on for a while, and it blows up in our face. Right? Agile has failed. Agile's not a swear word. Not allowed to do Agile anymore. And you blame Agile, of course. You would never take accountability for your decisions and blame yourself. You blame Agile. You blame the framework. Blame anything but yourselves, because somehow the 16-page Scrum guide must have been at fault when you pissed away $10 million on Agile. How could it be any other way, right? Certainly it must have been that 12-page or 16-page guide, depending on how you printed it out. Okay, so what's really going on here? What needs to go on? When we start rolling out Agile into the development teams, we've also got to help the teams that they interact with. So if my delivery team is interacting with enterprise architects or the data folks or the governance folks, then those folks need to start learning how to be Agile. So if I'm an enterprise architect and we've got one Agile team and 20 traditional teams, then my enterprise architects need to be able to pony up one enterprise architect to support the Agile guys, and then all the other architects are going to focus on the traditional guys. And then as it evolves over time, as more and more Agile and Lean teams spin up, then more and more of the enterprise architects and the data folks and the governance folks and the operations folks and whatever the HR folks and whatever else, they've got to become more and more Agile until finally, whatever the percentage of Agile teams are in the organization, there's enough of the supporting organization that is also working in an Agile manner, but also recognizing that if we still have 15% of our teams doing traditional, then 15% of the architecture effort is still going to be traditional, because you got to keep the lights on there too, right? So there's a few interesting implications of that. Team coaching is reasonably straightforward and reasonably short term. This is typically done in the order of months, 3-6 months, and you can get an Agile team up and running and chugging along reasonably well. But if it takes me many years to roll Agile out across the organization, then it's going to take me many years to evolve the enterprise architects. Fair enough, right? Because the enterprise architects, they evolve at the organizational pace, not at the single development team pace. So now, the Agile adoption effort of these people are at risk of getting knocked out by budgeting concerns, by reorgs, by goofy things going on in the marketplace, and so on. If it only takes 3 to 6 months to help this team get going, not a lot of time there for a reorg to blow you out of the water. It takes me 5 years for these folks. We're probably going to go through 2 or 3 reorgs, perhaps. And every time there's a major reorg, you're at risk of getting taken out and shot. So, serious problem. So, something to take into account here. So there's an implication here. We've got different types of coaches. So a lot of the times you talk about these team coaches. I'm an Agile team coach, I help teams. That's great. That's the vast majority of the coaches out there. But we also need some specialized coaches. So coaching the enterprise architects is a different animal than coaching a development team. You need to understand enterprise architecture. If you're coaching the data folks, you need to have deep experience in data or they will not listen to you. And I do this a lot. They have wonderful excuses for why they can't be Agile because the laws of physics do not apply to them. They're special, they're wizards, blah, 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 blah. Complete and utter nonsense. None of that crap holds water. But you need to be able to go head to head with them, and you need to be able to show them how to do this stuff, or they will not change. And even when you go head to head, and even when you show them, it is still a 2-year running gunfight in most organizations. Because they have decades of religion telling them they need to do detailed data modeling up front or the world will come to an end. Right? Complete and utter nonsense. But that's what their religion tells them. And when you help them to make that culture shift, you need to respect where they're coming from. You need to understand it, you need to help them, and you need to show them a path, and then you need to fight them along the way to keep them on the path because they love going into the swamp and never returning. Right? This is the problem. And of course, we have executive coaches on both the IT side of the house and on the business side of the house, if you still distinguish between those. And that takes a lot of experience. Notice how I'm talking many, many years of experience to be a coach, not a 2 or 3 day workshop or a couple of month, coach to coach type of thing. That's a great start, but you need years of experience. And how many people here have kids? You set them off to basketball or hockey or whatever, right? Would you hire a hockey coach? Would you send your kid off to learn hockey for somebody that doesn't know, who has never played hockey? Or has maybe a couple of months of skating experience, and now they're trying to sell you hockey coaching skills? Would anybody do that? Okay, so why would you hire somebody that took a 2-day Agile course maybe a year ago, maybe has been on one project, and now they're pitching themselves as an Agile transformational coach, and give me lots of money to do that? In what alternate universe does that make any sense whatsoever?
Because it fits the bill rate.
It fits the bill rate. Yeah, I'm sure I can hire a hockey coach for $5 an hour that doesn't know how to skate. But I'm not getting the job done. My kid's not going to learn how to skate, right? So yeah, we got to be a little smarter about this. You get what you pay for. Might be a way to say that. So anyways, when you're building your Agile COEs, this is for like a medium to large size organization, you're going to have some enterprise coaches, a bunch of team coaches, and then the occasional specialized coach that can go in and deal with these various groups, because they do have unique needs and unique visions of the universe and stuff like that, and it takes time to help them. So how do we transition these enterprise teams? So as I was saying, all these groups have their own religions. The data folks, they've got the DAMA religion. The project management folks, they've got the PMI religion. The operations folks, they've got the ITIL religion. The business analysts, they got the BA-BOC religion, and so on. The enterprise architects, they're totally disorganized. They got multiple religions. They haven't even fought that out yet, right? And all those bodies of knowledge, all those religious books, they all have different views of the universe. They're all the center of the universe, by the way. All the messages are the same, if only including the Agile stuff. If only everybody works exactly this way, and if only they recognize us for the gods amongst men that we really are, and just do exactly what we want, then everything will be fine. But the problem is that all of these religions are different. None of them are at the center of the universe. And if I'm trying to build an IT department or organization, I got to somehow make this mess work. Right? And if we let those groups go off and do their own thing, what's going to happen? They're all going to locally optimize. They'll all view themselves at the center of the universe. Empires will start to get built. Wars, political battles will start to occur. Progress will grind to a halt. And we see this all the time in our organizations, right? So we need to step back. We need to observe this. And the challenge is that my IT governance effort so the IT governance at American Airlines will be a very different animal than IT governance at Southwest, even though they're both airlines. And that will be a very different animal than at Intuit, than at USAA, and so on and so on and so on. So we need options. This is where choice is good, context counts. Yes, we're all governing, I hope. Hope we're governing effectively. But all those companies will do it differently. So one size does not fit all. So beware of these books of knowledge that say that this is the best practice. And of course, all these groups have different priorities as well, right? So this is, we've got competing religions, competing priorities, and of course, we're all at the center of the universe. Other than that, it's an easy problem to solve. So what's our challenge? So what do you do? So say you're an enterprise, say you're coaching in these enterprises where you have these legacy cultures and that. So where do people generally fall? Now this is all observational now, but my experience has been that the developers, the business folks, the business executives, IT executives, pretty much want to be agile. They pretty much embrace this idea of changing and learning. The executive level is pretty on the ball in most organizations, regardless of what how we make fun of them. But they really are mostly on the ball. They really do have a clue. The people in the trenches, at least the developers, tend to also be able to observe that we need to get better, because they tend to be on the receiving end of all the goofiness. So we're preaching to the choir with those folks. What I found is that the project managers, the enterprise architects, the business analysts, they're sort of in between. Some of them embrace change, some of them believe in Agile, some don't. It's more of a range there, so it's a little harder, a little more effort to deal with them. So convincing these folks to go Agile is almost always a no-brainer. Convincing these folks, a little bit of effort, but not so hard. Every so often you'll see some enterprise architects teams that are very skeptical or very so these are averages basically, but for the most part a little bit of effort to get those folks moving, but it's possible. But it's a lot of effort to get these folks moving. I'm sure many of you are working in companies with quality assurance departments that are still all about manual testing. Hand me a big detailed spec and I'll test, right? That's not testing, that's not quality, that's useless, that's cheap, low-end bureaucracy, and we want to automate all that, right? But we don't have the skills to do it because we've been cheaping out on what we've been paying for our testers. So these are all averages. Your mileage may vary. Having said that, I was actually working with a company very recently where the data folks were actually way ahead, and they were very pro-agile, very, very unusual. So take it for what it is. But in general, these are the patterns that we see. So what's the implication of your coach? Well, if you're preaching to the choir, let's show them some new ways, right? Throw out some ideas, and you're pretty much good to go, right? So coaching in those environments is pretty straightforward. Coaching the people that are sort of in between, you got to show that you understand their issues, appreciate their religion, and appreciate what they're getting at, and then show them new ways. But for the most part, a little more effort, but it's pretty, it's just a little more engaging, I guess, or a little more preaching than usual. My experience though is that for the hard agile folks, the skeptical people who want to avoid change, you got to show that you understand their issues, and you also got to show you can do it better. Here are better ways. Let me show you again. Let me show you again. No, you're not special. Let me show you again. And here, let me help you set it up, and let me show you again. And you got to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. A couple of weeks ago, I was at an organization working with the data warehousing team, and it was this really weird dynamic. It was awesome to see this. The product owner was this really, really experienced, strong woman who was absolutely frustrated with this team. And she just constantly kept berating them, well, not berating them, but was on their case constantly because the data folks were always going off and we got to go and model everything to the nth degree and work on all this sort of stuff. And she just kept coming up with experience of previous examples of, I asked you for this and then you went off and you did this. Well, we need to do this because I didn't ask you for that. I don't care about any of that. Nobody cares when that. You released that. Nobody's using it now. I told you not to do it. You did it anyways. And you didn't do what I wanted, and you did something else for whatever BS excuse you've got, and nobody cares, right? And then like 5 minutes later, another example, another example, another example, another example. And then we started, doing workshopy stuff, but it was interesting when they still couldn't get out of their habits, even after you make it very clear, no, we don't need to think all these things through, just stay focused on what you're being asked to do and nothing else. And then 10 seconds later, they're back to their old game, because it's really hard to break habits, really hard, right? So it takes a lot of effort, and it's not just about big group hugs there. So some parting thoughts before you take a few minutes for questions. So when we're in these enterprises, I invite you, accept the situation that you actually face. Observe, and you know what? And these weird situations, they're not unusual, right? You're not the only company facing these, but accept the fact, whatever situation you're in, accept it. Stop looking for easy answers. There are none. There's a lot of snake oil out there. It's not working out, right? You got to accept. I'm in a hard situation. I'm going to have to work it through. I have to do some hard work to dig my way out of this hole. You also going to be looking beyond software development. Software development is great. This is where all the Agile stuff is coming from. But it's really about the entire organization. Ahmed was very clear about that in his keynote today. We need to be prepared to scale both tactically and strategically. So being able to take on larger teams or geographically distributed teams or regulatory compliance, things like that, that's what's called tactical scaling. So my development team can work in these more unusual situations. Scaling strategically means going across the entire organization, and let's optimize the flow across the entire organization as opposed to just software development. We need to do this people, process, and tooling stuff simultaneously. You will not get away from that regardless of what you would prefer to do. And these enterprise IT teams and the business teams as well, like the finance, the procurement folks, the control folks, the business operations folks, they also need to evolve. We need to change our rules of engagement with the entire organization, but it's going to evolve at different paces, and that's okay. We need to be more comprehensive when it comes to coaching. It's not just about software development teams. Yes, but to be fair, that will be like 95% of your coaches, but you'll need more than just that. Otherwise, bad things will happen to you. And this is not a project. And I appreciate a lot of organizations, they only have project-based funding because their project management folks are completely and utterly out of control. But if that's the way you got to start, then that's the way you got to start, right? But you'll very quickly realize this is not a project. This is a long-term thing that we need to invest in. It's a journey, not a destination. Certainly, project funding does not make any sense for this whatsoever. And that actually might be one of the first ways you can sort of dig your way out of the project management mindset, realizing that, hey, this Agile stuff, or this transformation stuff certainly isn't a project. So anyways, thank you very much. I've got a few minutes for questions. Any questions? Oh, and I probably need to repeat for the filming, so please be concise. Thank you. Any questions?